Good afternoon. Thank you all for giving me a couple minutes this afternoon. I look forward to taking you through a little bit of a journey here. My presentation is really looking at privacy from two different lenses. One is from a business impact lens. For example, if your company wakes up tomorrow morning and you're on the headline on the Financial Times and other well-known industrial trade magazines saying your company's been breached, what's that mean, right? What are the cost impact of that type of announcement? And then I'm going to switch it over to what it looks like from a consumer perspective, through a consumer lens. What do consumers think about privacy, and how does it affect what they do when it comes to their online behaviors? So let's get started. Before I kind of delve into this a little bit, I wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about how privacy has really taken center stage, at least in my world, for people that do the types of things that I do, and that we can barely wake up in a given morning and not have some sort of privacy-related thing that we have to deal with. If you live here in the EU, I hope you're aware of this new regulation that went into effect on May 25th called GDPR. That's the General Consumer Data Protection Regulation. And basically what it's trying to do is establish better privacy controls for consumers. And just so you know, the whole world is watching this. Every country on the planet is watching what happens with GDPR to understand what they're going to do from the outcome of GDPR within their own regulatory bodies and statutes. The second, unless you've been sleeping under a rock for the last 6 months, there was this major news cycle about Cambridge Analytica taking advantage of Facebook data to help position a certain candidate for presidency in the United States. And as that started to unfold, more and more, for lack of a better word, dirt came out about the activities that Facebook was doing when it came to dealing with consumer privacy. In fact, just this past week, it was disclosed that they give a level of detail to some 60 different device manufacturers that was way beyond anything that Cambridge Analytica had access to. And their logic is like, we have to be really tight with companies like Apple and Amazon and Samsung in order to have the best usability experience on their device. So there's a lot going on around the privacy impact when it comes to using things like social media and the consequences that are just now coming to face. And then last week, there was a big news cycle in the States about and I hope Alexa's not in there. Every time I say Alexa, I feel something's going to light up and ask me questions. Anyways, there was an Alexa device in a home, and they started having this discussion, and they told Alexa to start recording. They didn't know they were doing this, but apparently they had told Alexa to start recording the conversation, which she did. And then after a while, she stopped, and then apparently she asked what they wanted to do with that, and then, well, send it to this certain person they had in their contact list. And imagine all the complexity that had to go on to give Alexa those level of commands without anybody knowing it was happening. And so when Amazon sent their engineers in there to understand, okay, what happened? Sure enough, all those activities took place, and now Amazon is kind of scratching their head saying, okay, now what do we do? Right? Obviously, there are consequences that are taking place from the private discussions that our consumers are having that are being sent out there without any regard for the consequences of those discussions. I mean, thankfully they were having a discussion about garage doors or something like that, but imagine if it was something more intimate, something they didn't want their neighbor or their friend to know, or something that would embarrass them. Oops, is that going? All right. Another thing I wanted to make sure that we're aligned around is that we live in this environment where free is kind of a given, right? Imagine if we had to pay for things like Twitter, Facebook. Imagine if we had to pay Google every time we searched, right? We don't want to do that, right? We like the idea of free things because free it's easy for us to process. However, it's important to understand when it comes to online behaviors and what you do online, nothing is free. everything that you do, every activity you take, every behavior you express is somehow being used to somehow market to you or be used for you at some time in the future. The challenge with that is most people don't understand the line between when is it something that you're okay with versus something that you're opposed to. You may not want these companies to understand of your things like your sexual preference or your marital status or your how old you are. You may care less about the fact that they know or geographically where you live so they can make sure you're getting offers that are kind of tailored to you based on where you live. But the notion that data is currency is taking on new life, especially as we get more and more concerned about how this data is being used in ways we haven't ever thought about. Now think about a couple years ago when Facebook acquired WhatsApp. It's about a $19 billion acquisition. And at the time, WhatsApp had about 19 million in revenue. Or sorry, 10 million in revenue. What did Facebook value? What was the value that they thought was worth paying so much money for that company? It came down to the information that WhatsApp had on their users. And they were willing to pay $55 per user for every WhatsApp customer just to have the rights to access and use that data. So when we talk about data as currency, that's what we mean. That the things that companies value today is the data that you actually are willing to share with them. And it's funny because sometimes you actually pay them. You pay Amazon whenever you go buy something. What you don't necessarily understand is Amazon uses that information to serve you up offers and other activities. So it's not like you're just going to Amazon and they're blind to the transaction. They know full well of your buying behaviors, things you want, things you admire, and are serving you up offers to make sure that you're getting those things when you most want them. Here's kind of a scary number. In 2017, there were 2.5 billion records that were lost or stolen. Think about that for just a second. That's about 4,900 records every minute of every day for 2017, an 88% increase year over year in the number of breaches that we saw in their space. And so the question is, well, what are they looking for? Why are they spending so much time trying to get access to this data? And this is why. The data that these bad guys are looking for when they try to access and breach a company is worth 10 times that of a breached credit card. So if somebody is successful at breaching a Target or Home Depot or another retailer and able to get those credit cards, that's worth about $1 or $2 on the dark web. However, if I'm able to get a lot of information about you as a user, your address, your date of birth, other information that would allow me to target you in some sort of attack, that's worth 10 times that of a breached credit card. And the thing that makes this data so interesting is it lasts forever in a lot of cases. You can't change your date of birth. You can change your address, but you kind of got to move, so there's a cost to doing that. So a lot of the data that they're accumulating is increasing in value because they're getting more and more sophisticated on how to mine that data in order to leverage that data and attack either against the business you work for, or other types of entities. So let's talk a little bit about the business impact if you're the headliner on the Financial Times at some point in the future. First of all, the cost for that company to remediate and fix this whole activity, and I can't see it on my monitor here, is 157 euros per record, right? It's a little bit higher based on where you live in Europe. In Germany, it's 189, and Italy, it's 129. So it varies a little bit country by country, but the average across Europe is 179. Think about, if any of you have been paying attention to what happened to the United States last year when Equifax was breached. Equifax is a credit monitoring company that collects information on almost every American, has things like your social security number, your credit scores, cars you buy, houses you buy when you try to take credit, and they build this score. So it's this rich database of information about almost every consumer in North America, and it was breached. Right? Imagine if there's a company here in Europe that you share an extraordinary amount of information with, and all of a sudden that company is breached one morning or one day, right? These are the costs that that company would think they have to bear. In fact, when you think about Equifax, they're still uncertain what the total cost to Equifax is going to be in order to remediate the whole Equifax breach. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, it was disclosed that even more information than they thought was originally taken in the breach was breached. Stuff like driver's license numbers and things like that. This monitor's not working. So how long does it take, if you're breached, for you to get better, right? First of all, an important data point here, can you get better? There are some companies that cannot afford the reputation harm that comes from being breached. But if you can, it's going to take you about a year to recover your reputation. So any monies that you have tied to marketing and building your customers and building your business, for a year is going to be greatly challenged, because most of the people that were affected by that breach, or people that heard about that breach in the news, are going to be really suspect about doing business with you for about a year. And after a year, they start loosening up a little bit, and they kind of forget about that event, and they're willing to move on. But for about a year, the consequence of you being breached is going to impact your P&L, your ability to invest in your business in order to continue to grow and become a successful business. What's the impact to your brand, right? And this number varies widely based on the type of company, the type of breach, the data that was lost, or a number of different variables that go into this number. But the impact to your business could be anywhere from 163 to 263 billion euros. Think about that. You lose a year of basically reputation damage. You have a massive consequence in dealing with each of those breached records. And then you have to spend an extraordinary amount of time dealing with regulators, putting remediation in place and things like that in order to deal with the financial impact of a breach. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit to consumer sentiment, primarily here in Europe. So I did a survey. I asked one of my researchers to go and do a simple survey and ask, looking at different popular brands here in Europe, which ones do you think are more willing to treat your information well versus not? And I'll be honest with you, I was genuinely surprised at the winner. It was IKEA, right? I would have never guessed IKEA would kind of stand out as one of those companies that are really, heavily favored in dealing with your private information. Now, we did the same survey in the United States, and Apple was the #1 company. And the thing that makes Apple, I wouldn't say unique, but Apple spends a lot of energy promoting the fact that they are very, very keen on keeping your private data private. So again, even though I've shopped at IKEA and I've bought some goods at IKEA, I don't think IKEA has ever embraced me as, hey, listen, if you buy from me or my company, I'm going to make sure your data is held in the highest regard, where Apple goes out of the way to do that. Another thing that I thought was very interesting is Nestle. What data does Nestle possibly collect on consumers to suggest that they're somehow at risk? And oh, by the way, the least trusted company in the United States was Coca-Cola. Only 7% of people trusted Coca-Cola with their data. And that was the same situation. I said, well, what is Coke possibly collecting that could do harm to a consumer? And God is my witness, 2 weeks ago, Coca-Cola announced that their systems had been breached, and several thousand of their employees' data have been leaked out to the internet. So I guess Coca-Cola is not particularly good at keeping private information private, and now they're suffering the consequences. We've always known that Europe has been much more sensitive about private information than other countries, but we really didn't know how much. And this kind of shows some of the countries that are highly concerned about privacy versus others. And it's not at all surprising to me that Germany is the country in the EU that is most concerned about privacy. In fact, when we build our internal product strategies and we talk about things that when we go to market with new products and whatnot, and it has a specific privacy slant to it, we talk about how's it going to work in Germany as kind of that litmus test of should we actually go to market, because if it's successful in Germany, chances are it's going to be successful in other parts of the world. And if you're wondering, the United States came in at about 21. So countries like Germany, France, UK, very keen on keeping private information private. India, it doesn't seem like they really care that much about their private information. But India, and again, you got to think of the economic conditions of the country. You know, the average Indian would prefer to give as much information away as possible to get something for free or discounted, as opposed to being overly concerned about the impact of giving that information away. Where when you have a more industrial, more advanced country, you're less apt to want to give that information away because you understand the consequences of doing that type of behavior. All right, these next couple slides are going to go through pretty quickly, but the intent is to talk through we all, if we're in business, we probably have an app, we probably have websites, we probably have all those things that most businesses have today. But when we look at this from a privacy lens, why didn't consumers click on come engage your company? 51% didn't click on an online ad that you posted because they were worried about their privacy. 44%, hold on, this isn't rendering correctly, withheld personal information when you asked them to fill out a form or something like that. Or if they gave you information, they gave you something that's known to be wrong. Maybe they said they were born in 1900 or something like that that'll make the data useless to you. 36% have stopped using your website. So they were so concerned about their privacy that they decided, I'm not going to go to this vendor's website anymore. 36%. 32% have stopped using an app. We have apps for everything today. The app is as important to us as the website was not 10 years ago. And some 32% have stopped using an app because of, or 29% have stopped using an app because they're worried about how you were going to treat their privacy. And 28% who are in your shopping cart buying a good or service from you have stopped using your application or your commerce site because they're worried about privacy. That was money that was going to come into your organization or to your business that was going to help you reach your financial objectives. That's just gone because they didn't trust that you're going to be able to take care of the information in a safe way. And, 74% have limited their online activity based on privacy concerns. So when you think you're doing all the right things, protecting the privacy or the sanctity of that consumer's data, the consumers aren't aligned with that. And when they hear about things like Facebook and all these other things that are happening on a regular basis, they're even less inclined to interact with your company. What are some of the technologies that are affecting the future of privacy? One is just the volume of connected things. Right now we have 11 or so billion connected devices. And we're adding about 4,800 devices every minute of every day. By 2025, we're going to be connecting 152,000 devices every minute of every day. And most of those devices have very little to no security about them. Artificial intelligence or machine learning is going to have a massive impact on privacy just because of the ability of that technology to pull the information out at a pace never before realized. And the advent of 5G, am I getting, okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. And I'm going to go right to questions because I feel I've got 20 seconds left. So